I'm Daytona Everett, joined now by Vinoo Varghese. He is a white-collar federal criminal defense lawyer. He's an expert on everything big-time law.
If you're innocent, you should be able to say you're innocent. You should be able to say that without any chance of penalty. But the reality is that if you're innocent, it doesn't matter in this country. You are presumed guilty. While the law says you're presumed innocent, that's not reality. Reality is when the cops have a suspect, a person of interest, they will do everything they can to pin this on the person of interest.
You're watching Live Now from Fox. I'm Daytona Everett, joined now by Vinoo Varghese. He is a white-collar federal criminal defense lawyer. He's an expert on everything big-time law, and this is a case, Vinoo, that we have been following, is in national headlines and will be for a while now. Gabby Petito. We're getting new evidence every single day. One of the pieces of evidence that we're getting is pretty large, the body camera footage that we can see the couple together, Brian and Gabby. I'm curious what your thoughts were of that.
Well, look, I mean, the tabloids are presenting it as damning evidence against, the guy in the relationship. I actually am not sure about that, but here's what I do know. Like, if you want to set yourself up to be a suspect in a homicide, like have the girl disappear, drive her van back to Florida, and then, hire a lawyer. Let me take another step back. There's nothing wrong with hiring a lawyer. Here's the problem with our criminal justice system in America. There is a presumption of guilt. You may hear that somebody's presumed innocent in the law, but the reality is he's presumed guilty because he is the number one suspect. And he may have done it, he may not. But the point is that under our law, the presumption of innocence is supposed to protect the innocent, those who are not guilty of any crime, but the government will look at and put their finger on and try to put a crime or pin a crime on. So he could be innocent. The problem is for him, he looks guilty, and the way that he's handling things is not the smartest way. His attorney should be making a statement saying that, he has nothing to do with this, and, he's just merely exercising his constitutional rights. The attorney hasn't made those kind of statements.
Yeah, but I mean, is it so wrong for the public to be thinking, hey, this kid may have had something to do with it? For all we know, he was the last person who was there right before she went missing. I mean, it's a pretty normal assumption that he isn't saying anything. He must be guilty. That's what the average person across the country is probably thinking.
Right, but the average person doesn't understand the criminal law until it affects someone that he or she is close with, right? So the rights guaranteed under the Constitution do not mean zero or mean zero until somebody you care about is being investigated or being charged by the government, whether local, state, or federal, it doesn't matter. People don't get constitutional rights until it happens to somebody they care about or someone or themselves. So here's the thing with this guy, on the outside looking in, he's a person of interest. He's suspect number one. But until the government, whether it's the state of Florida, the state of Utah, or the federal government, the FBI, proves or establishes enough to arrest this guy, he should be presumed innocent. Doesn't mean because he was with her that he's guilty of murdering her. I get the optics. The optics are bad. But his lawyer should also be defending him in the court of public opinion. That's the ethical duty of his lawyer. And his lawyer is not doing that right now. His lawyer should be coming out and saying he's hurt, he's innocent, and he wants to help find the actual person who may have harmed his girlfriend.
So what are his rights right now? From what we've heard from police and officials, they're saying that he is not assisting in the investigation. He's not working alongside them. He's sitting at home. So there's people who are wondering why hasn't a search warrant been obtained to where they can go knock on his door and get some answers?
They don't need that. Law enforcement can get warrants to get his cell phone data, the warrants to get her cell phone data, and figure out where she was or where her cell phone was prior to the time that it went dark, right? Prior to the time that it went blank, and then compare that with his cell phone data. They don't need to go after him. And the fact is that every citizen in the United States has no obligation to assist the police in an investigation that's going to target him or her. So here's the point, right? Let's assume for a second that he's innocent. I know that sounds crazy, right? But there was a movie called The Fugitive that came out much before you, but in my time when I was young, that talked about a person that was innocent, that all the optics appeared that he was guilty. Now, in the time that the movie came out, you didn't have all this technological innovations or technological abilities that the federal government has today or the state governments have today. So let them go run its course and see if they can tie him to where her body was last seen. And that should help them locate. Look, the police, whether the state of Utah, local police in Utah, Florida, or wherever, have an obligation to help the family. The family needs closure. They need to know where their daughter is, whether alive or dead. And it sounds terrible. They need closure. That's their responsibility. Secondarily, is to catch, if she had been murdered, is to catch the killer. And if they do so, they need to do so in a proper way. And that's where law enforcement can come in, use this technology, and if he's the killer, they can get him.
But is it outrageous to think that they need more than just his cell phone data, that he would have critical information that maybe a cell phone wouldn't be able to show?
Right. So their cell phone data can lead them to places they stopped, right? A gas station, a diner, a restaurant, a motel, right? Wherever they stopped. Now, they were sleeping in their little RV or whatever it was, so maybe they didn't need to stay over at a motel. But there's enough there that'll lead them to people that can see the two of them together. So it's just going to take time. And so the reality is...
Sorry, continue.
No, the reality is that, people are impatient, right? The 24-hour news cycle is impatient, right? So they're like, oh, let's get this guy. Let's hang him up on a cross. Let's just do it. He very well may be guilty. And I can tell you this, if you want to set yourself up as a suspect, no one has done it better than this dude, right? So he is with her. Also, he's driving her van without her back to Florida. No bueno. I mean, that's not smart.
I guess that was my question. If someone is presumably innocent, which you are innocent until proven guilty here, why wouldn't he be complying with police? Being so tight-lipped seems suspicious to the average person. So I'm just curious what you think next steps are going to be from Brian Laundrie. Do you think that we'll be hearing from him and his lawyer in the coming week here, especially when time is the essence in a missing persons case?
So here's the thing. I mean, what you're saying is the way it should be, right? If you're innocent, you should be able to say you're innocent. You should be able to say that without any, chance of penalty. But the reality is that if you're innocent, it doesn't matter in this country. You are presumed guilty. While the law says you're presumed innocent, that's not reality. Reality is when the cops have a suspect, a person of interest, they will do everything they can to pin this on the person of interest or the prime suspect because they need to close their case. That's the reality. So even if he is innocent, the optics look bad, and therefore it makes perfect sense for this guy to, quote unquote, lawyer up and protect his own rights, because the US Constitution, our framers were brilliant. Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, John Adams, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton. They knew what they were doing. They understood that when the government can go too far, they understood that 300 years ago. Therefore, they created the Fifth Amendment right to remain silent and protect yourself against self-incrimination. Because no matter what he says, the cops are going to look at him like, dude, you did it. Therefore, we're going to work and use whatever statement you give against you. That's reality.
In your experience, do you think that police officers are putting out that suggestion to him to come forward with the possibility of lessening a sentence? This is looking way in the future, but
Right.
if he is in fact guilty, what are those conversations like? You've likely been in those before.
So this is a popular misconception. Cops can't control how a case goes. You know who can control? The prosecutor, the lawyer, the person who works for the government, who's an actual lawyer. So at the state level, the assistant district attorney, the assistant state's attorney, or at the federal level, the assistant United States attorney. So that person determines how this case is going to go. And the cops can make all sorts of promises. They can lie. The U.S. Supreme Court has said it's okay for cops to lie in order to extract a confession. I mean, so that's the reality. So cops have a situation where they're allowed to lie in order to extract a confession. So therefore, when somebody actually says, you know what, I'm going to invoke my constitutional right to remain silent, they go nuts. The public goes nuts. And this isn't a moral issue. This is an issue about ethics, about society. And the laws are in place. Our founders created these laws to protect innocent people. And sometimes in protecting the innocent, a guilty man may go free. But one of the precepts, the maxims, the bedrock principles of American criminal law is that it's better that 10 guilty people go free than one innocent man go to jail. A lot of people may not agree with that.
We heard from the family of Gabby today, specifically her father, Joe Petito, speaking out. He kind of made it seem like Brian, the boyfriend, was a lost cause at this point, putting him to the side. They say that they want any information, any and all information, to assist with the investigation. What do you think they're looking for?
I think it's a great move. I don't know if the family came up with that on its own, or they were coached into that by law enforcement. Look, so much of the law is emotional. It's not logical, right? So for them, they are appealing to the emotions of the family that hopefully somebody will come forward, because there's no doubt that Brian is the prime suspect. Forget person of interest. He's the prime suspect. I knew that before he was declared a person of interest, because as you said, he was the last person who was supposedly with her. So therefore, it's important for law enforcement to use every means it can. And that's what law enforcement should do. They should do so ethically, but there's nothing wrong with one family appealing to another family. Absolutely nothing wrong with that.
All right. And we have seen some evidence that has been released, more than an hour's worth of body camera footage from officials who stopped the couple during their road trip. And there was a sort of domestic situation going on between the two. There was a verbal altercation, talks of physical altercation. What type of evidence will this be moving forward for the case?
Well, if he's ultimately charged, I would move, if I were his lawyer, I'd move to preclude that, because that doesn't mean just because there was a domestic altercation, that doesn't rise to the level of murdering someone. I mean, that's the reality, right? So like, just because somebody had been involved in an argument doesn't mean that that person went on to kill another person. Clearly, prosecutors will try to use that as a basis of bolstering their case in an attempt to bolster their case. But that doesn't mean that that's that's indicative. We use the legal term probative of the person's guilt.
And again, looking into the future of this, because we do that as journalists, seeing where this is going to go in the future. What kind of implications do you think this national spotlight on this case is going to have when it eventually hits court?
So that's a great question, and there's two ways to look at that. One is that the national spotlight, assuming that this guy Laundrie is the person charged, the national spotlight in this case brought him to justice, right? That's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is the national spotlight demanded, cried for justice, and needed somebody to take the fall. And that could be the boyfriend, because it's an easy narrative, right? And that's what his lawyer will be or should be arguing.
I mean, as a lawyer, a defense lawyer, would you recommend that he speak out to the public or no?
I would, because as a lawyer, there is both an ethical obligation to defend somebody in court, but to defend someone, not only to defend someone in court, but to defend that person in the court of public opinion. So if you're defending a client, the court of public opinion is almost impossibly just as important as the court you're going to be in front of in an actual criminal trial. Because the persons on that court in a criminal trial can be influenced by the court of public opinion. So therefore, you want to promote the narrative of innocence, the narrative of not guilty at the least. And certainly that lawyer, and most lawyers don't understand this, you have an obligation to defend your client. So it's not enough to say he's not cooperating, but to say that he's innocent.
Vinoo, any last thoughts? What do you think is going to happen in the coming days here?
Well, I have no doubt that this guy's going to be charged. It's just a matter of time. It's a question of whether the police have the forensic evidence to tie him to her death. Now, the important thing is to remember, right now you have no body. You have no body. So until they get a body, or until they definitively enough time has passed where they can say that she's been murdered with enough forensic evidence to tie him to different locations, that won't be enough. Will there be enough to charge him? Maybe, in Utah and Florida, that may be enough for probable cause, but it may not be enough for proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yep. A lot of unknown answers right now, and definitely a lot of questions. Vinoo Varghese, thank you so much for joining us here on LiveNOW from